Welcome to the release video of OpenRCT2 SIM. OpenRCT2 SIM is a fork that I've been working on for about the last 6 months, and I'm very excited that it's finally in a state that I can release it somewhat. And this video is supposed to give you a bit of an overview about the most important features that I've implemented so far. OpenRCT2 SIM's design goal is to make OpenRCT2 more realistic and more simulation-like. So a lot of it has to do with the guest behavior, which I found to be somewhat of similar to a hive mind, so that all the guests are relatively similar. They don't have particularly unique mindsets or tastes, stuff like that. And so I'm trying to make everything a bit more realistic and give the guests more personality and yes, things like that. So let's get into the features that I've implemented for the first version. By the way, if you want to download it, the link is in the description. The first feature I want to show you is the right price update. Before we get started, maybe let me elaborate a little bit about the right price calculations that is in, I think it is in Vanilla Roller Coaster Tycoon as well as in OpenRCT2. Basically, we have a very generic junior coaster here called Golden Dynasty with very average and medium stats, pretty average overall for a junior coaster. And so the game would calculate a value for the ride based on those stats: excitement, intensity, and nausea. I hope I remember everything correctly. It has been a while since I implemented this feature. So, and then the game also allows you to charge a little bit more for newer rides. So all rides that are new get a boost in their value. And this declines over time, so the older the ride is, the lesser you can charge for it. I've removed that completely because I found it to be pretty tedious maintenance stuff that you have to do over time, or you install an add-on such as the automatic ride price calculator. But anyway, just setting the price based on these three criterias doesn't really give a realistic evaluation for the ride, in my opinion. So what I've did is I've also factored in the average speed and the ride time. So naturally, I don't know about you, but I would pay more for a ride that is first of all decently exciting, but as well as quite a good ride time and a good speed, so that I get my money's worth at the end of the day. So in this first version, I have showed you, or I have implemented it like this. You'll see the old price. This is the base price. That means the price if the value of the ride is completely decayed. So if it's new, you could charge even more, but this is the oldest price. So for this junior coaster in the vanilla version, you could charge $8.6, euros, whatever currency you have set. Now you can charge $7.60 or €7.60 in this case. Let's get into a couple of more examples. We have a little bit more exciting Wild Mouse, which has a old price of 12.2. It's pretty insane. And the new price is at 12.6, since this is a quite exciting ride and it has pretty decent average speed, good ride time. So let's get into the other end of the spectrum before we go into some more extreme examples to the upside. So here is probably one of the most famous or infamous coaster designs that you can do. We have a corkscrew roller coaster that's basically going up and down. I don't think anyone would pay $6.20 for this thing, and now it's only worth $1.08. By the way, I have basically kept all the flat rides the same, so no changes to the flat rides apart from that they're value is not decaying anymore. But even some of the flat rides have a ride time, and they do have a ride average speed, and that's important because, or that's one of the reasons why I factored in both of those. So, for example, for this rotor drop, the old value was 10.6, $10.60, and the new value is $5 for this rotor drop. The reason is that both the average speed is pretty low, as well as the ride time is really, really low. So this ride loses a lot of value. I think it was OP basically also in the base game. But the calculations is done the same for all the rides. I'll go into the math a little bit at the end of the video for those who are interested. But for now, I'm just going to show you some examples. We do have a similar example here with the launch freefall. The difference is that the launch freefall has quite a good average speed, but still loses most of its value because the ride time is just so short, and yeah, that basically kills it. Also, what kills, or I wouldn't say kill, but what tanks the value of the rides is when the stats are pretty low. So we have this, what is it? A bobsleigh coaster with really bad excitement and overall just bad stats. It does have a decent average speed. It has a good ride time. But even the old ride price was very low, 4.8, and the new ride price is even lower. So generally, the reason why I've implemented it like this is to incentivize people making, first of all, coasters that have good stats, but also coasters that are interesting, that have a good ride time, that have a good average speed. The reason I factored in the average speed is because of rides like this one, the splash boats. Everyone knows the splash boats have an insanely long ride time. So if I would have just factored in the ride time, then the value of this ride would go through the roof. As we can see, this ride has a ride time of 3 minutes and 30 seconds, and it's not really a long ride overall. So that's why I've also calculated in the average speed, which is only 4 kilometers per hour, and which results in an old max price of 11.8 and a new max price of 10. So those were the examples where the roller coasters were losing a little bit of their value compared to the vanilla version. I would say overall you earn a little bit less, especially in the beginning if you build small coasters. So maybe it's worth it to build a first big coaster right off the bat. We do have another example here, the Wild Mouse. It has decent stats, so it is a little bit less long, a little bit lower speed than some of the other coasters we have seen so far. So, but it does have a pretty high old price, and it didn't lose much value as a result of it. Now, let's get into some more interesting examples. For example, this multi-dimension coaster has pretty high stats. It does has a good average speed. It does have a good ride time. I would say 1 minute 44 is quite decent. And the result of this is that you can charge a bit more than you would be able to previously charge. But this is far from an extreme example. I'll get to some more extreme examples later. So this one, for example, has an extremely high intensity. I'll get to that a little bit later, because that received a rework too. And otherwise, good average speed, not so good ride time, but still, the maximum ride price went up by quite a bit because the speed is so good on this coaster. Lastly, in this part, the last one I want to showcase you is this twister coaster, I think. Yes, it's a twister coaster called Nemesis. Let's look at the stats. Also, pretty high intensity, pretty high excitement, really good average speed, really high ride time, and as a result of this, instead of $15.20, you can now charge $22. And by the way, yes, I've increased the limit that you can charge for a ride from 20 to 40. as a result of this, you can also charge $40 for umbrellas for now. So let's get into some other parks. I want to showcase you a couple of more examples. So here we are in a new scenario, and I want to show you two rides. I first would like to start with this bobsleigh coaster, just as a comparison to the bobsleigh coaster we've seen in the previous scenario. As you can see, this bobsleigh coaster has much better stats. It is faster. It has a pretty high ride time of almost 3 minutes. So as a result of this, you can, instead of 11 bucks, you can now charge 13.4. So yeah, that just shows the difference, that even with basically ride types that aren't known to be that good, you can actually achieve quite good ride values if you put some effort into the coaster and make it decently long. The other one I would like to show you is this mini coaster, or mini, I don't know exactly what the coaster is called. Let me quickly look. Mini roller coaster, yes. So we do have this mini roller coaster here, with an absurdly long ride time, and as a result of and also quite decent stats. As a result of this, you can, instead of 12.20, you can now charge 17.60 for this ride. By the way, this the value display here is also in the game at the moment, just mainly for debug purposes, and so that you can get a feel of the differences. So let me know in the comments or on GitHub whether that is something you would like to see that I keep, or whether I should put it into the cheats menu or something like that. Regardless, so those were the example for this scenario. I want to hop into one more scenario. And now we're getting into the last two examples that are quite extreme. As you can see, we have a gigantic hyper twister here, which is really high, has insanely high stats, really high average speed, very long ride time. So basically everything you would like to have a coaster. And as a result, you can see that the old price would have been 16.8 and the new price is 28.40, which is why I increased the price that you can charge for a ride to 40. Although I have never been able to make a coaster that you could charge more than 30 bucks for. So I think it doesn't go much beyond that. I do have one more coaster that I would like to show you. This is called Watermelon. Has insanely high stats, is 45 kilometers per hour, and has a ride time of 2 minutes and 34 seconds. And instead of 17.6, you can now charge $28.8. So again, we are a bit short of the $30 mark. It's gonna be interesting to see if someone can make a coaster that would be worth more than 30 bucks. So that was the ride price update. I think we should get right into the next feature. The second feature I would like to showcase you is the intensity rework. So basically I have pretty much reworked the whole way intensity works for, yeah, pretty much all of the game, almost. So as you can see, we're still in the same scenario with this gigantic vertical drop coaster, and as you can see, the intensity is in the red. I've kept this in the red for transparency purposes, but it's not an issue anymore. As you can see, the guests are still going on the ride. So generally in vanilla OpenRCT2 and in RCT2 itself, the game has a artificial intensity cap of 10, basically. So every ride that has an intensity that is higher than 10 would basically be completely unattractive, and it will kill all interest the guests have. It's basically like an auto kill switch for a ride. If it has an intensity higher than 10, then it's basically dead. I think you've all seen it already on your own rides. If the intensity is over 10, it's dead. I've removed this. Now the penalties only kick in if the G-forces are too high. So as you can see, the G-forces on this roller coaster are completely fine. That's why the guests are still going onto this coaster, even though the intensity is quite high. But as I said, I've reworked the whole intensity structure, so all the guests have different intensity preferences now. I'll get into this a little bit later. But yes, as I said, the penalties only kick in, and you'll notice that when the excitement drops is when the G-forces are getting too high. Otherwise, the intensity just will deter the guests that are sensitive to high intensities. They will obviously not go on this ride, or tend to not go onto this ride. Um, but yes, so let's get into the guest intensity rework. Okay, I don't want to get into too much fancy math at this point, but generally the intensity of the game goes from around 0 to, I think the maximum is 15. And this is what the preferred intensity distribution of the guests look like at the moment. Please note that everything is currently subject to change. This is the very first release, and as a result of that, expect a lot of changes and fine-tuning and stuff like that. So, but this is what the guests currently like. So the sweet spot is around 7 to 7.5 intensity. Those will be the rides that attract most guests. But if you have a lot of guests in your park, you can make um, I think you can make rides work that have an intensity of 14 and rides that have an intensity of basically 1 or less than 1, which we have a lot of flat rides. So as a result of that, let's jump back into the game and look at some of the guest intensity preferences. So this one is a bit of an outlier. He has a, yeah, just more than 3. Maybe it's quite long in the park. I'm not sure. Um, so traditionally in OpenRCT2 and RCT2, you will see a lot of guests that have an intensity of greater than 4. And now you have a lot more range-bound intensity preferences, so that the guests, yeah, this one has less than 11. This one is another one that has more than 3, more than 4. Getting some bad examples at the moment. Yeah, so this is typically what you can expect from a guest, that the average is somewhere around 7, and the lower end goes usually beyond like 0 to 4, and the higher end can go up to, I think it can go up to 15. Yeah, more than 4. We do still have a lot of guests that have a lot. So this one has less than 14. I think that would have been not viewable, or that would have been not existing in the vanilla game. Let me click through a couple of more of them. This one has between 4 and 13, between 7 and 13. So you can see there is a lot better of a distribution regarding the intensity. As a result of that, the guests will go on also very high intense rides, or there, at least if you have a good number of guests, like we have 4,000 guests now in this park, you will have guests that will like to go on to high intense rides. Hey, it's Future Me, and just after editing the whole video, I've looked into the intensity stuff a little bit more, and I noticed that I've played actually most of my scenarios with a bug, and that's why most of the guests don't have the correct intensity values that should be calculated according to the formula that you will see right after this segment. And so I wanted to take the time and look at some newer guests that just spawned into a park, to give you a little bit of a better overview what the intensity preferences for the guests now look like, because the intensity is saved by the guests or by the game, and that means whenever you load a game, you will have the guests with their saved intensity values and not with the values according to my algorithm. That also means that if you load a scenario which has been created with the base game, and those scenario comes with pre-existing guests, those guests still have the intensity values calculated by the base game. That's just for the information. Otherwise, we can see that most of the guest intensity preferences is between, yeah, somewhere in the middle, like between, should be the middle should be around 7 or 8. As we can see here, we do have a couple of outliers, like this one has more than 9, and um, yeah, this one has more than 7, less than 7. So those are a little bit of outliers. Two and between 2 and 6. This guy has a very narrow intensity preferences. But otherwise, you see that most of the middle values lie somewhere between 5, 8, 9 sometimes. But we do have a couple of outliers that definitely yeah, have very exotic intensity preferences, such as Theresa L, which has between 9 and 14. So yeah, it's all over the place, but it should average it out according to the formula that you'll see in the next segment. So I hope updated this updated preview gives a better overview about how the intensity of the guests will look like in when you play this version of OpenRCT2 SIM. Thank you, and let's continue with the video. The next major feature I would like to highlight is that guests now rate your rides. They do have a preference, or they develop a preference for your rides, and they will rate them accordingly and prefer rides that they have rated higher. So, how does this look like? Well, let's get into a positive example first with this Hyper Twister. As you can see, the average guest rating of this coaster is an 8.9 on a scale from 1 to 10. And it has been rated by 20,068 guests. Some are getting purged because the guests leave the park, and then they drop, because only those guests are relevant that are currently in the park. So if a guest leaves, then this changes. So it's rated by 2,079 guests that are currently in the park, not over the history of the coaster. So this should give you a pretty good idea of how popular a ride is going to be. It's definitely not the only deciding factor. I'll talk more about the ride selection of the guests in the next section. But let's get into some more examples. We will obviously have another very good rated ride with this one, which has 8.6. Then I think this is, what is this? Is this a rotor drop? Let's see a rotor drop. The rotor drop has a rating of 7.8, so this is also rated quite highly. By the way, it's calculated mostly based on excitement and the intensity preference of the guests. But I'm looking to extend that in a future update. So let's get into some more examples. We do have a hanging wild mouse, which has an average guest rating of 8.4. So all those can be expected to have a decent queue size or a decent throughput. This means that you can also gauge like what your throughput is likely going to require. That means if a ride is rated, like, I would say, above 8.5 or so, then the throughput is likely going to be has to be quite high to accommodate all the guests. I mean, it also always depends on how many guests you have in the park, but still. On the other end of the spectrum, you can also have like low throughput rides, such like this one, the snow hopper, that you can still get a good amount of guests to ride, because it caters to their intensity preference, maybe. I think this park is maybe not the best showcase, but I want to go into a couple of flat rides to show you the other end of the spectrum first. So, um, the upper bound for flat rides is probably the Enterprise, which has a rating of around 6.6. I think this will be pretty consistent across parks, unless you have a park where guests prefer either very low intense rides or very high intense rides. As I said, this highly ties into the intensity rework that I've done for all the guests. So the rating is highly dependent on the intensity, and whether the intensity matches with the intensity preferences of the guests. On the other side of the coin, or the other example, for example, the merry-go-round has abysmal ratings of 1.8 because it's neither very exciting, nor is the intensity likely to the preference of the majority of guests, hence why it has been pretty much trashed by all the guests. So you can see you see the full spectrum. I've also seen like a couple of 4s somewhere, like the swing ship has a 5.6. We have the snow cup twister with a 2.9. We do have flying saucers with a 3.0. So the whole spectrum is pretty much used. I think you can expect a decently good coaster to have a rating of above 8. Usually, I think it's quite rare for an exciting ride to be lower than 8, but I'm sure you can make it work. We have this wooden roller coaster with an 8.4. We have a free fall with a 7. So yeah, we have quite a good variety. I want to show you a couple more examples just to get a good glimpse of how it's working. So we'll jump into a different park. So we are back in a new park, and I want to give you a couple of more examples. So this looping coaster has pretty much the ideal intensity rating, and as a result of it, you can see that the average guest rating is high compared to this gigantic twister coaster, which has an absurdly high intensity rating, and as a result of that, you can see that the average guest rating is below 8. So usually that's not very good for a coaster of this size, and there's still enough guests in here to there are not too many guests that go into this coaster. So you see that at some point, if the intensity gets too high, even though the G forces are still okay, the guests will start to not like the ride because it just doesn't match with their intensity preferences. Also, this one also has a almost 12, but the rating is a little bit higher because it's still in the 11. The cutoff point is always the full number, so basically everything that's after the colon doesn't matter anymore. Maybe I'll change that in the future. Well, let's see. So you can also see what each individual guest rated your ride by clicking on this screen. So you can see we have the Blue Lantern here, has been rated a 10 by Sharon J. That's because she likes rides that are more intense than 8. And she no, well, that's why she rated this so highly, and you can also see that she trashed most other rides except for the Violent Thunder, which is this. Wait, yes, it's the other ride which has extreme intensity ratings. Those cater to her preferences. That's why she gave them a 10, and even like the Force 9 for here, for example, which has an intensity of 7.4. It just doesn't match what she's looking for, so she didn't like it very much. So yeah, that's something to keep in mind. Every guest has different preferences, I'm looking to extend that further. It has very wide ranges, like less than basically this person has the whole spectrum of intensity preferences. I haven't messed with the nausea yet, so that's something that I will probably do as well at some point. And just to wrap up this, the way I approach these three ratings is that I treat excitement as a purely positive thing, so the higher the better. I treat intensity as a personal preference, so each guest likes a different value, and I treat nausea as a purely negative thing. The higher, the worse it is. Just that's the current design philosophy. I'm not sure if I am totally gonna stick to it. We'll see, but that's for the first version. That was the design philosophy behind that. Okay. Next, we'll get into a couple of smaller changes that I've made. First of all, the soft guest cap has also been slightly reworked to accommodate the change that I've made to the ride values. So basically now longer rides with better stats and better high average ride speed increase the guest cap more, and rides that have lower values doesn't increase the soft guest cap as much. I may remove the soft gas cap in the future entirely if when I rework the advertisements that I want to at some point. But for now, I'm just having it displayed here so you can have a look at it and see how it changes. If you're familiar with the original game and you know how it's calculated, it's quite a complex formula, but there are videos on YouTube that you can watch if you're more interested in that. And the second smaller addition that I've changed is I have made it that guests now actively seek out first aid rooms and toilets if they need to. So as you can see here, this has built last year. It has like already 228 customers per hour. Should be higher, significantly higher than in the base game, because the customers are actively looking for the first aid room if they are too nauseating. And the same applies to the toilet, which also had quite a number of guests. I think this is one of the few toilets, and maybe we can find this one is heading to drink stalls. Yeah, this one is, for example, is heading to the toilets. We can see toilet is getting higher. So yeah, they do actively seek out the toilets now and the first aid room. I will probably do something similar for drinks and food items, but that's a whole different can of worms that I don't want to open right now. But those are the main changes currently made to the game. So, lastly, before we wrap up this video, I want to get into some nerdy math for those who are interested. Anyone else, feel free to quit the video right now. So, this is basically the graph of how the ride values are calculated. So, we're coming back to the very first point. On the x-axis, you see the old value. On the y-axis, you see the new value. I have plotted the green line as the green line is the reference coaster, which is representing a coaster that has an average speed of 24 kilometers per hour and an average ride time of 90 seconds. And as you can see, the $6 mark is like the average, and so if the ride has an average speed of 24 kilometers per hour, a ride time of 90 seconds, and a previous ride value of 60, then it will remain at roughly 60. Everything higher than that will start to skyrocket. Everything lower than that will trail off into slightly not profitable. I've also graphed out, so again, like the green is the reference line, As you can see, we have a line right at the bottom, the red line here. The red line represents basically the worst coaster that you can have. That is a coaster with an average speed of 1 and an average ride time of 1. So basically, with the lowest values possible. Obviously, that is not a realistic design, but it is there just for reference. The blue line is the free fall tower with a average speed of 56 kilometers per hour and a ride time of 11. Obviously, you can increase that by, I think, increasing the amount of hops that it does. As you can see, it is significantly lower than the reference line. So the updated value is going to be significantly lower. Again, if we look at the 60 mark, instead of $6, you have to divide this by 10. You will be able to charge roughly about $3.8, I would say. So yeah, that's that. Next, we get into the black lines. First of all, I think that's the lower black line. I think that's a log flume. This is the other end of the spectrum. So we have a very slow coaster with 6 kilometers per hour, but pretty long with 2 minutes. Again, as you can see, severely under the reference coaster, especially on lower ratings. This coaster will lose a lot of value. And then we have another one, which is the splash boats. I believe this is one of the splash boats I've did with a reference of 4 kilometers per hour and 209 seconds of ride time. Even though the ride speed is slightly lower because the ride time is so significantly higher than the one of the log flume, it is performing better. So yeah, you can compensate a long or a short average ride duration with a long ride time, or you can compensate a low ride time with a high average speed, at least somewhat. Then we do have some higher examples that you can see go significantly higher. First off, we have the blue coaster, which is a pretty fast coaster that is 40 kilometers per hour, but is below the reference duration of 90 seconds. Still, it overperforms the reference coaster because it's so much faster. And then the orange coaster, I believe, is both faster and longer than the reference coaster. And as you can see, it significantly outperforms the reference green coaster. And then we, last but not least, have the dotted coaster, which is a bit of an extreme example with 62 kilometers per hour. I'm not sure. I think this is a coaster that I've done with boosters and the ride time of almost 3 minutes, 2.5 to 3 minutes. And as you can see, it is quite insane. Instead of being able to charge $6 for a coaster, you would be able to charge almost 10. So yeah, that's a little bit of the math. If you want to see the full formula, feel free to pause the video at this point. Otherwise, thanks for watching. If you want to try out the game or the version, the fork for your own, the link is in the description. Please, you also feel free to provide me feedback either on this video or preferably on GitHub, so that I know what you like, what you don't like, what you think needs improvement. As I said, this is really the very first. This is the very first release. It is probably a bit rocky. I've tested it decently enough. I've made quite a couple of parks with it, and it seems to hold up well. Known issues is that Rides with multiple stations probably don't work that well. I don't know if multiplayer works. That's something I haven't tested yet. And I'm not sure if scenarios with where guests have either extremely high intensity preferences work well or extremely low intensity preferences work well. So those haven't been tested yet. I assume they should somewhat work, but I don't know in what capacity they may break. The game is still compatible with the vanilla save games, so I haven't changed that. So you can load every save game that you started in regular OpenRCT2. Let me get rid of this screen so that we can finish this off with the little bit of the park. Anyway, if you have questions, feel free to reach out on me to me on either GitHub or in my Discord. You will find the link in the description or in the comments of this YouTube video. And let me know what you think about it. Let me know if you have any features you think would be really beneficial to a more realistic approach to OpenRCT2. And I thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy. Take care. Bye bye.